And thank you to our panel. Shauna set it up. There's been this extraordinary movement taking shape in the world. We see it all over the world, almost every week now, every Friday in particular, of young people showing up, standing up, speaking up, acting up in ways that has caught the attention of the rest of us, and maybe in ways they haven't seen since, frankly, the Vietnam War era, or maybe a few others in between. And so I want to talk about that today. We have, starting down at the end, Marlow Baines from Earth Guardians. In the middle, Isha Clarke from Youth versus Apocalypse. Always a good trade-off. And next to me is Tokata Iron Eyes from Standing Rock Sioux Tribe and Indigenized Energy. Let's start a little bit with each of you. Tokata, let's start with you. Just give us a flavor of the journey that brought you, frankly, to this stage.
Sure. So I started public speaking when I was 9 years old. I'm Hunkpapa and Oglala Lakota. I am indigenous to this land. And when I was 9, my mother took me to a board meeting in the Black Hills, which was a really sacred site to the Lakota people. And she told me that I was probably going to be the youngest and one of the only brown and indigenous people in the space. And she said, right now you have the option to speak your mind and raise your voice and stand up for what you believe in. And when I was 9, I wasn't really thinking about what it meant that there was going to be uranium mining in the Black Hills. I didn't know what it was. But my mother had explained to me, and my parents had just made sure my entire life that that they were teaching me my indigenous history and knowledge. And a part of that was recognizing nature and recognizing the earth as my relative and recognizing that as a part of me. And so I knew, no matter if I could tell you what type of chemical was going into the ground or coming out of it, I knew that it was going to be damaging to the water and in turn damaging to me and my people. And so at 9, I started speaking out for indigenous sacred sites and for indigenous environmental rights. And then when I was 12 years old, I was living in Standing Rock, where I'm from, and the Dakota Access Pipeline was proposed. And that was a very different story because I could really feel and see the effects that the pipeline would have. Some people came to my school and told me about the effects that it could have on the community and what would happen if it broke. And so that's about the time that I learned that it would take 10 minutes for our water to be contaminated at school, 15 to reach the entire community of Standing Rock. And this pipeline was proposed to go right beneath the Missouri River, which is my tribe's only water source. And so again, I chose to say something. And I found that was my position, that was the role that I could play to be a part of the solution. I knew that I didn't want to be complacent. I knew that I didn't want to just sit by and watch this happen. And so I found an avenue in which I could help.
So who did you want to speak to? Obviously, you can speak to the world through the media microphone, but when you wanted to stand up and say something, who were you talking to, and what did you want to tell them?
I think I found myself wanting to talk to regular, everyday people who just weren't aware of the situation that indigenous people are in and were in then. It was about being able to educate and spread awareness around the atrocities that were happening in our communities around the globe. Because Standing Rock was one fight, it was one pipeline. Mm-hmm. But this is happening every day, and it is an epidemic that is rarely addressed. And so for me, it wasn't about trying to reach politicians who had been stuck in their ways for years. It was about trying to reach everyday people and telling them that their choices and their voices mattered. Especially as a young person, growing up in a community where I felt that my voice was valued was essential for me to be able to do any of the work I do now. And so being able to give that opportunity to the people around me and to the youth was really important to me.
Isha, you've been fighting a somewhat different fight here you're in my hometown of Oakland, California. Talk a little bit about how you came to that and what you're working on now.
Yeah, first, good morning / almost afternoon to everyone. I feel super honored to be here. Thank you for having me. My name's Isha. I'm born, raised, and educated right here in Oakland, California, like you said. And so my beginnings with this fight started here. So the first ever climate action, climate-related anything that I ever did was an action targeting Phil Tagami, who is a very prominent developer in Oakland, and is trying to build a coal terminal through West Oakland, which is actually 2.5 miles away from my house. And so before this, I didn't really feel any sort of connection to climate justice. I was kind of like, that's not my issue, like that's kind of hippie, woo-woo, like that's not my fight. But at this action, I recognize, first of all, what environmental racism is and how central it is to fights for environmental justice and climate justice. And in that moment, I recognized how important my voice was in that movement, and I recognized that historically, climate justice movements didn't reflect me or the communities that are constantly being directly targeted by its impacts. So that's how I started.
And I think suffice to say that in your neighborhood, the asthma rates are significantly higher than even just a few blocks away. West Oakland is 6-8 blocks from where we're sitting right now, and because of the trucks coming to and from the port, there's very high asthma rates. How do you, in your community, do you experience that personally, or in your family and friends, neighbors?
You know, I live across the street from the freeway, and at first, the only impact that had on me was, like, it's hella loud, you know? Like, I can't sleep. But I realized that that's so much pollution that's going into my lungs and my sister's lungs, and I've been super lucky to stay very healthy through all that, but I have recognized that in my community, low-income Black and brown young people are having elevated rates of asthma, and are having family members experience super terrible health issues from this bad air quality. And that would only be made worse by this coal terminal. And so I wanted to address that.
Yeah, and so far that terminal has been held in abeyance. Although the fight's still not over, is it?
No. Phil Tagami, won the first lawsuit, but it's going to the appeals court, and so the fight continues. Right now it's kind of on a hold, but it's starting to pick back up again, so definitely all of you look out for that. The fight's not over. We have to stop this coal terminal from coming through my city and hopefully all of your cities too.
Yeah. So Marlow, you've been in a slightly different kind of battle, more in the courtroom. Talk a little bit about, first of all, how you came to Juliana versus the United States.
Yeah, so Earth Guardians, I'm the co-youth director for Earth Guardians, and Earth Guardians is the only organizational plaintiff within the Juliana versus the United States court case. If you all haven't heard about it, it's 21 youth plaintiffs suing the federal government for failing to protect their rights to life, liberty, and property. And it was actually one of the first ever kind of actions that I was aware of working with Earth Guardians. And in 2015, it was filed. And it's been kind of this journey because the federal government has continued to push back, has thrown like every wrench in the way of getting to the actual courtroom. And last year, a group of us even went down to Oregon because a few days before we were going to be going to trial. And then we found out like 3 days before that there had been some sort of really like niche little rule that had been thrown in by the government, and so they weren't able to actually go to court. So right now we're holding with bated breath to hear if we can go forward with the court case. But it's looking pretty promising, and the youth plaintiffs have come to the kind of forefront ever since. And so I feel really honored to speak about it and continue to look out for it, because it could be like the court case of our century here in the U.S. And really, the youth plaintiffs are not suing for money. They're suing for a comprehensive climate recovery plan. Yeah. And it's amazing because these youth, it goes from the ages of like 12 to now 22. All the youth used to be like under 18 when they first filed this lawsuit, but they are using their rights to this court system to hold the other two branches of government accountable, which is really huge and really powerful.
How did you come to do this?
Yeah, so I grew up always in the mountains and nature, and I have to give a huge shout out to my parents and especially my mom for continuing to kind of make sure that you always think about your impact on this earth. And when I hit high school, previously I'd gone to a Green Star school, so we compost, recycled, and then all of a sudden I was in this new public school. And not everybody believed in climate change, which was kind of like weird for me. And so I realized that, I had an opportunity to share and educate others. And then it was actually, I went up to Standing Rock for a long weekend, and I realized that people power is more powerful than people in power. And that it does not take anything special to be a part of this movement, and that all of us have a part to play in this.
So, that's a great line, by the way. I have a feeling you'll see that showing up on many Twitter feeds later today. People power is a lot more powerful than people in power, I think, if I got that right. So what happens if Juliana versus the United States succeeds? What happens after that?
They are, from my understanding of it, and like, I'm not gonna lie, I'm not an expert in this. The court system can hold the federal government responsible for putting together this recovery plan. We can't say, here's the plan, you have to follow it, but there are guidelines that the youth want to set, and they have clearly laid that out for the government.
Okay. I imagine for all three of you that being a youth leader has inspired other youth in your community or in other communities. Talk a little bit about Tokata, how what you've seen happen among your peers as a result of your standing up at Standing Rock.
I would say that it's a bit of a different story, right? I think there's a lot less education and awareness around Black, brown, low-income Indigenous communities. And for me, it was kind of this huge thing. I mean, I was 12 when this sort of revolution started in my hometown. And for me, it wasn't about earning the title of activist or public speaker. It was just kind of something that needed to be done. Because if we have our priorities straight, I think water should be on the top. And for me, that type of work was also a burden, because I was 12 years old, I was still in school trying to figure out everything, who I was, who my friends were, what I wanted to be when I got older.
It doesn't get easier.
Yeah. And it was, for a really long time, hard to see the sort of light at the end of the tunnel. Because once the pipeline was actually built, once Donald Trump was elected into office, and once this, project went through, being able to see that Standing Rock and these indigenous movements all across the globe still had a really positive effect, especially in the youth climate movement, and especially in this new sort of global awareness of these environmental issues. That was very hard for me for a long time, because I'm living in this community where I know that there's a pipeline threatening my water every day. And for me, being able to recognize that I might not be able to bring my kids back to their homelands, that I might not be able to ever drink from that river or take my family swimming, that was a huge devastation. And so for me, being able to see that, that sense of pride that was returned to being Indigenous and that sense of home, again, especially within living in this imposed U.S., it was a very different dynamic because we're living in these communities that haven't felt that sense of pride for probably the past 100, 200 years. We're talking about a people whose religion it wasn't legal to practice until about 45 years ago. This sort of tension, this trauma is something that's very raw, which is why I think the movement at Standing Rock was so impactful, because it shows the strength and resilience that's still resting in Indigenous communities everywhere. And for that, and for me, that's really inspiring. But at the same time, there are not resources available to these communities still to this day. And so living in a place that is impoverished and that's dealing with all of this trauma still, it's hard to focus on being a leader if you're still concerned about whether or not you have food on the table when you get home, whether or not you'll have clean water, whether or not you're getting an adequate education. Being a leader in a climate movement is one aspect of me. I come from a community that has been dealing with this historical trauma, with genocide, for the past 200 years. And so for me, it's not about recognizing this. It's not about recognizing who's in the spotlight. It's about recognizing the places that they come from and the issues that they're dealing with. Yeah.
Great. Isha, you, first of all, last week, I think it was, were honored with the Brower Youth Award, one of 6 young people who were bestowed that. It's the highest honor for youth environmental leaders, so congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Good. Part of your story has to do with an encounter that you had on Capitol Hill, or was it in San Francisco? In San Francisco, the district office of Senator Dianne Feinstein, a video that you may have seen, it went viral, where you and a group of others confronted Senator Feinstein about the Green New Deal, and you talked truth to power in that, and I think that's what led to the viralness of that video. What did that do for you? How did it feel? And was it empowering? Did it cause problems that you didn't expect? Talk a little bit about that experience.
Something that I've heard after that whole interaction went viral and some time has passed now is that moment was really important in the movement to sort of like normalize or popularize the Green New Deal. And so I think that feels really amazing to me to know that I was a part of changing the course of history, you could say. I don't know, maybe.
Certainly kicking history in the shins.
Right.
So definitely.
I think that the most important part of that interaction was the reaction of the public to that video, because after that interaction happened, I didn't realize like what had just happened. I had a similar interaction with Phil Tagami when I was a freshman in high school, and as a young woman of color, I have experiences of adults, white people talking to me like that all the time. And so I didn't process how messed up that interaction was until the world reacted to it like that. And in that moment, or in those moments of seeing this reaction and being, pushed into this now national global platform, I realized how much really needs to change and how many people are willing to fight for this movement. At our first climate strike on March 15th, we had about 2,000 people, and we were blown away. Like, we couldn't believe it. It was incredible. It was one of the most amazing experiences of my life. And then we just had a climate strike on September 20th, and there was about 30,000 people there. And so that's not that much time in between, and I am just constantly inspired by how many people are being drawn into this movement and are recognizing the importance and are recognizing that every single person has a place in this movement. You don't have to be sitting up here talking on panels, doing interviews, writing press releases, speaking in front of thousands of people. That's only one role. We need people who know how to fundraise. We need people who know how to make flyers. We need people who know how to go into schools and talk. We need teachers. We need business women and men. We need so many different types of people with different skills to bring into the movement. That's how we're going to reverse the climate crisis. Yeah. When everyone brings what they have and fights for what's right.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that a little bit. And Marlow, starting with you, we've got this room full of 1,000 or so business leaders, policy leaders, entrepreneurs, investors, and thousands more watching this on the live stream. What's the message? What do you want to tell them? What do you want them to know about what you and Isha and Tokata are doing that they don't maybe yet understand?
This issue can feel so hard and daunting sometimes. It's not always gratifying. You can feel very alone in this. And yet when we come into these spaces and we're saying we're willing to stand up for a more just and sustainable future and we're going to create that together, that's where the power and the hope and the continue to fight for this almost freedom comes from. And so, what I would say to all of you, and I think Isha said it perfectly, is we need mentors. If y'all have resources or have 30 years of business experience, then that's what we need, because we can work together, we can talk, we can give that hope, but at the same time, we need those people who have 30 years of business experience, or you're an entrepreneur, or you know how to write public speeches, and that is where we will begin to create this kind of regenerative cycle, because then you're also rising up with the youth. The youth then will all of a sudden one day be a part of the workforce, and think about how magical and powerful that is to be intergenerationally working together.
Tokata, what would you like the Verge audience to know?
I think one of the biggest things that anybody can learn from this youth climate movement right now, being built on in the work of Indigenous, Black and Brown communities, I think the biggest thing that we can learn is the fact that it is an issue of priorities, the climate crisis. Because when we want to talk about economic growth over people having clean water and the right to a livable future and planet, that is a sign that something is wrong. And so when we're talking about the climate crisis, we're not talking about something abstract. We're not talking about something that is far away from us or apart from us. We're directly talking about the things that exist in this world that made us who we are today. All of us need clean water and air to breathe. It's a personal issue for every single person in this room. So when we talk about these communities far away that are already being affected, so are you, because there's this saying in my language. It says "midakuye oyasi." It means we're all related, and a lot of people translate this as recognizing the people next to you as your brother and sister, but it's farther than that. It means that everything that exists right now is a part of us. Because genetically, because on a chemical level, the particles that build up everything around us still built us up too. Being able to recognize that nature and the earth and the systems that it's already created are older than us. Being able to nourish our relationship with this autonomous being with its own life force. Being able to recognize that in the first place is going to be essential. It's a mindset switch that we all have to make if we want to be able to create actual change. Because we can talk about lowering carbon emissions all we want, but if we're not prioritizing people, if we're not prioritizing their problems and their lifestyles, we're not creating sustainable solutions. Right now, Right now, indigenous peoples, indigenous communities have been maintaining and protecting 80% of the world's remaining biodiversity. So if we're not talking about protecting their ways of life, if we're not talking about protecting their rights, we are not talking about solutions.
Yeah. I want to get to some questions, but Isha, what's your message to the Verge community? What do you want them to know?
Yeah, I think
What do you need from them?
two main things that I have to say. One, to echo what Tokata just said, that we have to recognize the intersectionality of this fight. We have to recognize that this climate crisis is directly fueled by white supremacy, by racism, by greed, by economic exploitation, by all of these things. I could continue. I'm sure you know the rest. And that this fight in reversing the climate crisis is about completely reimagining the way that we exist in this world, in a world that doesn't have racism or white supremacy, or is constantly focusing on economic growth, like Tokata just said, that it's not just about the physical things like lowering carbon emissions. It's about seeing the person next to you as a human being. It's about undoing all of these systemic things that are existing that have created this climate crisis. So we always have to be thinking about fighting for migrant rights, fighting for economic freedom, fighting for livable wages for all, saying that Black Lives Matter. All of these things are connected to this fight against the climate crisis. The second thing that I have to say is, if we really want to get to a place where we reverse this climate crisis, because it's a foundational change, we have to recognize the people that are in the room when decisions are being made and when solutions are being created. We need people from frontline communities who are experiencing the direct impacts of climate change to be pioneering the solutions. We need indigenous people in those spaces who are showing us how to live and care for the land, because they've been doing that since the beginning of time. And so I challenge all of you, when you're in your workspaces, look around. Who's around you? When you're having conversations about things that are impacting communities, do you see anyone from those communities that are in the building? And if not, then something needs to change. Because if we don't have people who are experiencing this on a day-to-day basis, then we're gonna continue to repeat the same thing over again, and we're gonna be back exactly where we are right now. So thinking about fundamental change, that's what this is. And we have a unique opportunity to be able to do that right now.
Okay, let's get in a quick question from Heather.
Thank you. I know that you're speaking to my heart, and thank you so much for engaging in this conversation, because it's so important for you to be part of the dialogue. And that is the question that came to the sidebars. What has been your most effective approach to talking to and to connecting with people that don't share your point of view, that don't agree with you, both adults, by the way, and your own generation? How do you reach those people? What's been your most effective way of reaching and connecting with those people?
Let's start with you, Marlow.
We also have to realize that some people are not going to agree with us, but if the majority and the mainstream can see this issue as the crisis that it is, then we are going to up-level and shift what needs to occur to actually move forward and have a better world.
Yeah.
Yes.
Isha?
I completely agree with what you just said. A lot of my work has been going into my communities. I go into a lot of schools, high schools, middle schools, and talk to different classrooms. And more often than not, I find that it's not that people don't believe in climate change or don't care about it. It's that they haven't been given the actual factual information, which is that this is not a fight against, or this is not a fight for just saving the rainforest and saving the polar bears. Like, that's a piece of it. But ultimately, this is a fight for our lives, and this is a fight that needs to be led by people who look like me. Mm-hmm. And so when I go into classrooms and I say it straight like that, so many people want to get involved. It's about telling the truth. That's how you get people involved.
Yeah. Tokata.
Yeah, I mean, I think you both said it very eloquently. I would say that at a base level, we're all the same. And so whether or not people agree with me or don't, there is a connection there that has to be made, because you have to think about somebody's experiences and the ways that people have been educated around these issues. And so if you've been told your whole life that the climate crisis is something that eco-terrorists made up and then spread around the world as a lie, you have to think about how you can re-educate those people. Because it's not about trying to confront them and argue with them. It's about trying to get them to understand that this is not a fight for just us. This is a fight for their children. This is a fight for them and their future. And we all want the same things. And those things are happiness, those things are being able to feel safe, those things are being able to look forward to a future. And those things are all threatened by this climate crisis. So if we even, before we start talking about these political barriers that are keeping us apart, before we start arguing about these really minute, almost imaginary things, let's talk about the things that move us. Let's talk about the things that motivate us, and how we can protect those things together at the face of this problem.
Well, we are unfortunately out of time, but I just want to, first of all, thank you. Truly, I don't think there's a person in this room or watching this who isn't blown away and impressed. Not because you're young, not just because you're articulate, but because you're so insanely wise. There is wisdom in these three chairs here that is just extraordinary, and that gift to this community and to the world is beyond measure. So I want to thank you for that. Thank you for all you've done and will continue to do. It is so inspiring and important, and so much a part of what we need to understand. And thank you finally for challenging us, for speaking truth to power, for playing back to us how you see the world through your eyes and what needs to be better, not just from environmental issues, but from human issues. We are, Tokata, all connected, and you have helped us really understand that. Please join me in thanking Marlow, Isha, and Tokata.